Assalamu alaikum. Can you tell me your name and where you come from?
Welcome, Salam Shabana. My name is Atiya, Shamim, and where do I come from? I come from Rochdale now.
Where was you originally born?
I was born in Kenya, in Mombasa, and then I moved to Rochdale some many years ago.
Who did you live in Mombasa with?
As I said, I was born in Mombasa, so I had my parents, and then subsequently I had siblings. I was the older one in the family.
How many brothers and sisters?
I have two younger sisters. I don't have any brothers.
And what was life like growing up in Mombasa?
I don't remember Mombasa very much initially when I was born, because we didn't live there that long. I didn't live there that long. My father was living there previously. Once I was born, and then my sibling was born shortly afterwards, within sort of 12 months, we then moved to a place called Kisumu, which is in the west of Kenya. My father at that particular time was in the police service, and he kept getting transferred to different places in Kenya. So my early childhood, I do remember, is sort of packing boxes and going to somewhere new. I do have some early memories of Kisumu, and then subsequently after that. So I must have been, as I said, I was just under 2 years old maybe when we moved to Kisumu.
That must have been really difficult as a child, moving around all the time and having to establish new friendships. How did you find that?
I think as a young child, it didn't matter, because I think children are quite resilient. You learn a lot, you pick up a lot of different things, you pick up skills to manage. I also had a sibling who was very close to my age, so friendship-wise, it didn't make much. I don't feel much loss for that particular time. However, when I got into my teenage years, went into high school later on in a different town by this time, I struggled because all the children then knew each other, and I was the new one in this particular high school. So that's where I think I felt the little bit of a struggle.
Where did you move to in your teenage years?
So from Kisumu, we lived there for a couple of years, and then we moved to a place called Kiganjo. We then moved back towards the coast. So from the west, we moved completely to the east side of Kenya, to the coast, back to Mombasa, and then Malindi. We spent a significant period of time in Malindi, and then moved to Nairobi as a teenager. So that's where I started my high school.
What was life like in Nairobi?
Nairobi was, from what we were used to, from what I was used to in Mumbai, we'd moved from Malindi, which is a very quiet coastal town.
How long did you live in Malindi for?
About 10 years, maybe 7, 8, longer maybe, between 8 to 10 years we lived there. The climate was very good. It was by the seaside, so the food sort of was different to what it is in Nairobi. At that time, talking of good 40 years ago, at that particular time, you didn't have, people didn't travel that much, so you didn't have the mixing of the foods or the cultures of the groups. So moving to Nairobi, which was more cosmopolitan, it was the city, it was more busy, it was also cooler in climate, so it just felt really miserable and fast kind of country, whereas fast town, whereas living in Malindi and Mombasa was more laid back, more leisurely. Lifestyle we had there.
Did you find the neighbourhood and the people that you lived with different?
The different. So as I said, in Malindi again, we lived. We had a farm, so we lived on the farm. Neighbours were quite a distance away, so there wasn't a neighbour. You couldn't just, people didn't just walk in. We lived in our own contained farm. We had our workers who worked there. Whereas when we moved to Nairobi, there was almost, the place where we lived were like small compact houses, lived with next door to each other. You had too many, it almost felt like it was too many neighbours around, too many people around, everyone kind of wanting to know your business. So again, for my parents, my mother in particular, she found that really difficult, moving from somewhere where she could do what she wanted. She was very independent, to somewhere here she had to be careful. She had to, it was a new place to her. She didn't know how to go, how to take public transport, for example. And then having to worry about what will the neighbours say, what will this say? So that was a bit different.
It's quite an experience living on a farm. Could you tell us more about how that came about?
That came about following my father, who was in the police service, resigned after many years of service, and he had to work. There was no kind of system of pensions and doles and things like that, so he had to find some work. And he had previously bought a plot of land, so when he resigned from the police service, we no longer had the police houses which came with the service to live in. So very quickly, my dad was involved in building a house. My early kind of memories is running around on this building site while this house is getting built. And then the rest of the land was used for farming purposes. My father opened a little shop because it was a touristy area as well. It was more of a not convenience store, but like a little. It wasn't groceries actually. It was more. It sold things like, I do remember things like suntan lotions and plasters and things. And often you'd have tourists come who had sunburns or got themselves stung by something. So my dad would have to do a little bit of first aid for them. So he ran the shop and his business while Mum tended and organised the farm. And that was, again, every fresh food. We grew our own food. We had our own animals. So yeah, what can I say? That was life for us.
It's quite an experience for your mum to be running a farm.
Yeah.
Your mum was working at the farm. Your dad was at the convenience shop.
Yeah.
What about you and your sister?
Run around on the farm all day.
How old was you at this time? At this stage?
I think by this time we must have been about 6 and 7, and then we had another sibling that was born as well, little sister then. And I just remember, a little baby, and we'd just pick her up and put her wherever we went, on the farm. All day we were just out and about. We came back from school, and that was our, we had, my father had made sure, we had our own, we had our own pets. So if one had a dog, the other one had to have a dog. So we bought, we had the dogs at their kennels. We had our chickens. We had, there was no fresh water supply. So, my dad had built a well. And there was a windmill, and so there was always abundance of water that came. So it was like, we want a swimming pool. So he built, there was a little brick swimming pool. I mean, now when I think about it, it was probably no bigger than this rug or something. But for us, that was our little own swimming pool as well.
How did she manage running a farm and looking after the family as well?
I think my mum was quite an independent woman. She had, to start off with, she had moved from Pakistan. My father was born and brought up in Kenya, but my mum was born in India, what was India at the time. Then through partition moved to Pakistan. My father's family went back to Pakistan at some point, and during those times it was when he was him and my mum met, and the marriage was arranged. And so my father came back, and my mum travelled on the ship for a couple of months to come to Kenya, to a country where she'd never been before, the language she didn't know, a lifestyle which was completely different. But she adapted and she just got on with it.
Can you remember which year your parents got married?
I would want to say about 66, 67. Yeah, that's post sort of the independence time of Kenya, when Kenya got its independence in 1963. So yeah, it must have been about that sort of time.
Yeah. What was school like?
School was good, strict. School was a building with no windows, no doors. That was school, and if it rained, we had to all kind of huddle up and put our desks in the middle, so we didn't get rain on. I mean, fortunately, it didn't rain very often in Malindi, but that was it. So the not having windows and doors was very good, because it let out, you know, there was always fresh air that was coming, so you're not hot and stifled. Yeah.
And the school that you went to, did you have people from different cultures there?
Yes, I do remember people from different cultures. I mean, actually, I don't remember very much of that, but yes, there were some Asian people. There was some the coast area of Kenya is mainly with Arab people live there, so I do remember Arab children in our class, and also the local African children that came to school.
So was it a government-run school then?
It was a government-run school.
Did you ever manage to have any opportunities for school trips?
Not particularly in that primary school, no, because it was I guess there was funding issues. It was about who's going to fund. It was about the funding. So I don't think families could afford to send, to pay a lot of money to go on trips, and the government obviously didn't fund that. So yeah, the little trips I do remember is going to the seaside, to a monument or something like that within the town centre, or a sporting event or something like that, but not major trips. When I moved to when the family moved to Nairobi, and one of the other reasons for moving to Nairobi was there weren't very many high schools in Malindi. There were a handful, 2 or 3 primary schools, but the high school then was in a bigger town, much further away, and my parents were reluctant to send us on our own to Mombasa or the next nearest town, so they opted to move back up, close shop really, and move to Nairobi. So we could, my sister and I, by then we were of high school age, ready for high school, so we could get our high school education. And in Nairobi then, I do remember, we did have school trips to different, either the game reserves or to the mount, because Kenya has the Mount Kenya and Mount Kilimanjaro, so you'd have expeditions to different areas. So we participated in trips like those.
What was the name of your high school? Can you recall?
Yeah, I do recall. My high school was Kenya High School to start off with. It was initially built by, I think, the British when during the colonial times. It was deemed at that particular time a very high standard high school, and because everything was, you had to pay fees for schools. I do know, it was quite costly to send me to that particular school, and then subsequently my sisters then couldn't, my parents couldn't afford for my sisters then to go to that sort of school, so that there was other choices that had to be made at that time. After Kenya High School, until what would be called as GCSEs, I then started my A-levels at a school called Jamhuri High School. I did my A-levels before coming to the UK.
What did your parents do when they got to Kenya work-wise?
To Nairobi.
To Nairobi, sorry.
Yeah. So my father, again, he went into business. Because he was by this time, he'd known a bit of what to do with business. He went into his business. My mum then resorted to being a housewife. She used to sew clothes at home. She used to do cooking for other people if if people had cooking orders and things. So she resorted to earning her own income in that way.
Wow. How did you find living from a farm with all this space that you had to go and living in a city?
As I said, we did miss our farm. We missed our farm a lot. But then, as you're growing up, there are other things as young people you find more attractive. So yes, you made more friends. You could go out to different places, and we had a wider friend circle. So yeah, it was. And I think we got on with it. We just got on with what you've moved here, so you've got to live where we are. I couldn't say cannot remember an unhappy moment when I was a child.
What did you used to do in your spare time?
Spare time, again, school was given first priority, and then spare time we lived in a compound with other families, and right in smack bang in the middle of the compound was a big old table which we'd converted to our table tennis. We played table tennis there. We played badminton in the compound. We played football, any sporting activities. We had other children, even those who didn't live in the compound would come over, and we would get together and take part in things like that.
Was your neighbours East African Asians as well?
There were different. Yeah, there were some who were from There were some Indians who were Hindus. We had some we grew up with some Goan friends. We had some African friends. We had Sikhs. So yeah, we were just all multicultural, really. Anybody who came in joined in.
And as a teenager, you said you'd made more friends. Did you manage to spend time with these friends outside of school?
I think a lot of people tended to come to our house because my mother was always, my parents were actually, both mum and dad were, although we didn't have much, maybe financially, but everybody was welcome, and whoever came were fed and watered like this, just as we would be. So yeah, we spent most of the time with people coming to our house. Yes, now and again we would go out. I'm trying to think. The concept of like going out to malls or shopping or things like that, those didn't exist at that time. You only went out shopping if you were accompanying your parent to going somewhere. You didn't go shopping just walking around in the town centre or malls. At that particular time it didn't exist. Now it does exist. It exists here and it exists there as well. So there wasn't many places where you could go. You could go to your friends' houses as well. You could go and see, be sociable in that way. But I think a lot of my friends preferred to come to ours.
What did you speak? Which language did you speak with your friends?
It was a combination of everything, really. There was English. It was a medium we kind of all spoke with each other. Swahili is the common is the local language, so if we needed to. We spoke Punjabi at home. We knew the Gujarati that was going on in other, in the homes of other friends of ours, so we could converse in that if we needed to. There was, so we could converse in any particular language.
So Kenya was known as being a British colony.
Yeah.
What kind of influence did you feel of the British in Nairobi at the time?
As I said, I was born post-independence, so I can't talk of the time when the British were there. So I can't say that what their influence would have been. So by the time I was able to remember and recall things, the majority of the British had left. Most of the British had left. I don't recall many British people being there, but you could see in the buildings, the establishments started off by the British were there, but now being maintained by the African people. So to start off with, my school, Kenya High School, I think was a beautiful, beautiful school building, which was over lots and lots of big areas. So the classes were, and it was also a boarding school, so it had dormitories on one side. Our classes were on side. It had its own chapel in the compound. It had its own theatre, which outdoor theatre. I've never come across anywhere where we had such a beautiful outdoor theatre as well as an indoor sporting facilities, including the swimming pools and the gyms and the indoor-outdoor areas. So you could see, an influence. You could see, especially because Nairobi was the capital, you could see some of the places. You could go to big hotels and you could see that these have been left by the British. The museums, some of the national parks. Yeah, you could see that.
And just want to ask you about Eid. What was that like in Malindi for you?
Eid in Malindi was wonderful because it was mainly a Muslim area, so that was really nice. Just people dressed up, walking on the streets. It felt very, very joyous time. And not just Eid itself, the Ramadan throughout was, that again was very special because you could see everybody is fasting. Everybody was, and those who were not fasting were respecting the people who were fasting. And you could walk by in the streets in the evening just before if it was iftar, and people would hand, whatever little food they had, they would share that with you. So Eid was very nice as well.
And moving on to Nairobi, what was Eid like there?
Eid there was again a bit. I would say a bit more. How would I describe that? We didn't have an extended family, so obviously we didn't have family to go and mix with, so we had to rely on friends and family, and some of them were not Muslims. And yes, they may come and join in the celebrations, but that celebrations felt slightly different to what they would do. Less festive, yeah. I think more formal as well. That's what I was trying to think of. Yeah, they felt a bit more formal, but you could still have that atmosphere.
And Eid in UK, what was that?
Eid in UK actually, I think, felt even better. As an adult, so it does feel better because by now things in Rochdale here, you can access a lot of our foods. You can have there's the mithai shops, there's this, so you can just go out and celebrate Eid. You can go to the mosque, which is easier. In Nairobi, the mosques for us were a bit further away. So we didn't always get to go to mosque on Eid day. My father did. He participated in that, but the ladies of the house travelled less to go to on Eid days.
So you've lived in quite a few different towns and cities as well, and countries. We're just going to go into talk about food. What was the difference in the foods that you used to eat? What was your favourite dish?
I think favourite dishes, I just love food. It doesn't matter it doesn't matter what food it is. What I do think is my parent, and I give credit to my parents for this. Food, so I think Shabani, you have to accept that going back 40, 50 years ago, the variety of food of what we get now is so much different. At the moment, we just have so many things at our hand, and we don't, we can demand anything and we can get it. Whereas then, and I'm talking of time when I was younger, whatever was cooked had to be enjoyed by everybody. As I mentioned, lived on the farm, so it had to be what was in season and produced, and that would get cooked, and that's what you'd have to enjoy it. It didn't matter how whether you liked it or not. We had our own animals, so meat was not a daily occurrence. It was had to be on special times occurrences. When we lived on the farm, we didn't have our electricity either, so there was no way of storing food for that long. I do recall sort of goats and chicken being slaughtered. We had our fresh eggs, but things were fresh then. And when we moved to Nairobi, we didn't have it fresh at hand in that way, but we still knew, because where we lived, vegetables, there used to be local women who used to carry vegetables in their baskets, and they used to come and knock on your door every day and say, today we have this and we have that, and mum would decide, okay, we'll buy this. So you're not necessarily delivered, but it was you bought it at home, the vegetables. The meats again were done in similar way. Dad would go somewhere, and then you'd have 2 or 3 goats that would be slaughtered and then brought home and frozen and taken over, used over a period of time. Going out was not that. Going to restaurants was not that fashionable, if I may say so, at that particular time. But going to people's houses, entertaining each other was very was the mode of how we had our experiences of food from different cultures. And with that, again, I give credit to my parents that we've always, from a very young age, we would my mother loved cooking and loved to try out different things, so she would try out different recipes. So I can recall eating pizzas and pastas from I was very young, when I do remember my mum trying that out, and that came from influences. There were some Italian tourists that lived in Malindi, so she kind of would pick up ideas and try and work out from them. And other food influences, from ranging from the African to the Arab to the Indian food, was always a mixed. And our cuisine, and even my cooking now, has a blend of all those foods. So at this time, so when I came to the UK. And again, at that time, there wasn't this concept of, you could go out for a kebab or you could go out for chicken. There was very limited places you could go out for meals. But the food people cooked at home was very traditional handi roti, which I really struggled with that, because I was used to having different types of foods and tastes going on in the at home, and liked cooking as well. So the influences, I think my favorite I would put down to, I do like the Arab type of cuisine. That is something I enjoy very much, and would but you go for that one if I had the option.
When did you have the opportunity to learn how to cook?
I can always remember cooking, probably not cooking completely, but even as a young child, our mother, when she cooked, we always were with her. If somebody's going to the, you would start off with, go and get some tomatoes and chilies while you're out there, while you're praying. So yeah, okay, so when you've brought your tomatoes and your chilies or the onions, you can chop them up and you leave them there so Mum can then start doing the next bit when she was ready.
What age was you at this time?
And I want to say about 6, 7.
Wow.
Yeah. I do remember doing that. Yeah. But there were periods of time when we were studying, we wouldn't physically, we wouldn't do anything. As teenagers, I think more so as teenagers, when we had to concentrate more on our studies, then there would be days when we wouldn't do any cooking. We wouldn't be helping Mum in the kitchen. Otherwise, we had our own kind of rota, so 1 week one person's helping in the kitchen and the other one's clearing up, and the second week, the others, my sister was helping and I was clearing up.
At which age did you come to UK?
I was 17 when I came to UK. It was just after my A-levels.
What made you come to the UK?
I'd come to UK with the prospect of either getting married or or going for higher education. But at that particular time, I got married, and higher education had to come later on.
How did you find leaving the family and coming to UK?
Very difficult. Yes. It was very difficult leaving family and coming over. But I think, when you're younger, when we've gone through through that movement as well. I don't think I would call it separation, but there is that transience. That's it, the word transience. I just took that as part of the step. That's the next step in life, really.
When you came to the UK, did you come with anybody, or was it something you did independently?
No, I travelled for the first time on an aeroplane, and I was on my own.
How did that feel?
Exciting, really. Yeah, exciting, because you'd always see, you'd always go to the airport to see other people off, and this time you felt like, oh, this is my turn to come to the go on the aeroplane.
So was it London or Manchester that you stopped?
It was London at that particular time. Yeah. And then the travel to Rochdale, and that felt a bit quite tiring. Like it was never ending. Yeah, never ending. Yeah, and then for a good few years I had to, when I was travelling back to see my parents in Kenya, because my parents were still in Kenya for quite a length of time. I used to go regularly back. Initially, we used to travel to London to get before flights started going from Manchester. So,
what did you find the hardest about coming to a different country, besides missing your family?
Yeah. I guess missing your family was difficult. The weather was initially difficult to put up with, the different seasons, I think, because we were never used to having the cold and the hot, and summers never felt the same. What else felt different? So the weather was different. What I found also different and difficult to start off with was not being able to meet. I mean, it was nice in Rochdale. We came to a community which was predominantly Pakistani, of which a lot of them were from East Africa as well. But I missed the influences, the other influences that I was used to. So having, because you didn't mix with other white people. So the Pakistanis lived in their little houses, and we didn't mix with white people. We do so now, but at that time we probably didn't mix with the community as much. You didn't have any other people from any of the other Asian communities. You didn't mix with them, and that I found really strange, because if it was, how my friends would be writing to each other, and I know it's Diwali, but here, because they've written to me, I know it's Diwali, but there was no other way that I would know that it's someone else's celebration going on. So it was either Christmas or Eid, nothing else in between, no other influence. And now it's different, because you have the social media now. You do know when there is other things that are going on for other people. So those sort of things I initially found really difficult, but then you have to adapt, and you do. Yeah.
What was your neighbours like when you first moved here?
When I first moved here, we had predominantly white neighbours, and we were polite to them. They were polite to us, but as I said, that interaction was missing.
In and out of each other's homes and stuff. Yes,
that interaction was missing. I'd probably struggle with that now. As you get old, when you get older, you haven't had that, so that is different now. And actually now, when I have gone back to Kenya, people don't live like that there either. So maybe I'm just living on, kind of this old dream that I have. People don't live like that. People have moved on. But those are the memories that I have.
When did you last go back to Kenya?
I last went back to Kenya in February 2020, just before lockdown. Actually, towards the end of February, and I came, when I got back, we went into the first lockdown. And the purpose actually of going, I hadn't been for a while. I hadn't been for about 10-15 years. Prior to that, I was going very regularly. My parents lived there. I used to go more or less every year. My children were younger. I used to spend the whole of summer holidays then. But then after that, when my parents came to live with me in this country, there wasn't any need to go back. We didn't have to go back. But in the meantime, then my family's increased. I have grandchildren, and I often tell my grandchildren my stories of when I was younger, and my grandson kept saying, when can I go? So I took my grandson last year, and we did a trip back, literally back to where I was born, and we went to Malindi. We saw the farm, we saw the houses.
It's still there, the farm?
Yes, it's actually now built up into a more like not a housing complex, but the areas there, but it's more built up. Yeah. Things look very different. Went to my school, the one I tell you, which had no windows, no doors, and now it's a 3-story building.
Wow.
In the same compound, which when you're a child, it seemed like when you had to run cross country races 100 meters round the track, it felt so long, and now you think, is that it? Where's all that place? Everything just felt is all built up.
Did you manage to contact any of your friends?
Yes, contacted friends. I stayed with some of them, so that was very nice. And others have moved on as well. So so different people have moved on to different places.
And did you manage to visit Nairobi on your trip as well?
I did. I managed to visit Nairobi.
How's that
as well.
Changed?
Much more busier than what I do remember. But like any city, it's the capital of the country. It's bound to be busy. It's bound to be very built up. Too much traffic, too much people.
Atiya, could I ask you, what do you feel your greatest achievement has been?
Oh, I think I feel not one particular thing. I can think of a number of things.
That'd be lovely.
Yeah, I can think my greatest achievement, I feel, having moved, the whole transition is a huge impact for, and how it affects the life as well is how it affects one's life, and then how you subsequently then affect others. So you have your immediate family, your children, your grandchildren. That impact on them is an achievement as well. We valued education when because I've come from a place where I've seen how people struggle to get educated. Your last penny would be put aside so you could have an education, and now subsequently I'm working in that area of field where I'm trying to get people to attend schools or work with schools. So that is again, I feel, an achievement of achievement of where I've come from. Really, I've got a lovely family, children. That as you get older, that is part of life. That's how it happens. Yeah.
How many children do you have, Badri?
I have 2 children. I have a son who's 33 this year, and I have a daughter who's just turned 30. And then they both are married to some lovely people as well. So I actually now say I have 4 children.
That's lovely.
And some 4 grandchildren as well.
MashaAllah, that's lovely.
Yeah.
Is there anything that you can share about your parents with us, please?
As I said, my father was born in Kenya.
What's his name?
His name is Mohammed Salim, and he is, mashallah, 87 years old. And and his father was initially went to Kenya. So I look at myself, having our Kenyan links for over 100 years now. I often think, that's how long we probably have been in Kenya. My mother was born in India, in Jalandhar, which is in India now itself. And then when India and Pakistan partitioned, when Pakistan was formed, my mother's family travelled to a place called Okara, which is in Punjab in Pakistan. My father and mother prior to that did not know each other. We have no family connections. Our families did not know each other. We had my father's older brother went to Pakistan. He got married. My father met my mother there, and she got married, and they came to Kenya as in the early, about 66, I would say 67, 66. And my mum, her name was Safiya Salim, and very, as I've talked about, a very independent woman in her times. I think, she wasn't very much educated. She didn't have much education, but valued that. I think because she missed that, she really valued that. And then she went on to have 3 daughters, so she really pushed her daughters to get an education as far as they could do, because she always felt you had to better yourself. I think both my parents always supported myself and my sister to better ourselves in whichever way you can. And if you didn't get to go to university, that's okay. Do something better than what you can do. They were both hard-working people, never relied on. There wasn't a system of benefits and anything, handouts. So it was whatever you worked hard and you saved for yourself and you saved for your future. And that's where the things we kind of learned from our parents as well.
You mentioned that your parents lived in Kenya for quite some time, but then they moved to Rochdale. How long ago was that?
About 10 years ago. I mean, I came here over 30 years ago. And then eventually, to better ourselves, as I said, my parents did not limit where the daughters got married. If you got married out of the country, that's fine. One of my sisters got married and travelled to. She lives in Leicester, and the other one got married in Kenya, but she and her husband moved to Canada, so they left and went to Canada. And then my parents were on their own for a while. By this time, they were in the late 70s, I want to say. My dad was in his late 70s, my mum was late 60s. And they used to come and travel, they used to come on holiday here. We used to go and see them. But my mum got ill. She developed breast cancer. And that is one of the things which makes me thankful that I'm in the UK. Because two things really, not one, two things, education and health. When you have to pay for these things, that really does take the toll on you. And getting the right health service in Kenya was very difficult for my parents, for my mum. And my dad couldn't care for her. She had her operation and surgeries, and he just couldn't care for her, give her the same care as on his own. So they came to stay with me, and when they were here, I realised, initially they'd just come for a visit. They were going to stay 6 months and then go back while she was recovering, but I realised how difficult my dad, how he was struggling. And from then on, we made the move for them to stay here. My mum then passed away with breast cancer some 5-6 years ago, but my father lives with me here.
Over the years of living in Rochdale, what kind of changes have you seen with the environment and education and population?
I mean, Rochdale has come a long way, hasn't it? It's has come a long way. I like living in Rochdale. I mean, I never thought I would be living in Rochdale that long. And there were some times where, some periods of life where I thought, oh, maybe I should be somewhere else and not in Rochdale. But I am glad I am in Rochdale, because it is, I think, just right. Geographically, it's just right. You're not too far away from the city. You're not too far away from the motorways. Travel-wise, you're north and south. It's quite easy. Facilities in Rochdale, as a Muslim, there's plenty of shops now, plenty of mosques, plenty of the community is good. So changes for me in Rochdale's developed, has got the shops, the shopping centres, and they might not be as big as what would be in Manchester, but for me, I think it does fulfil the purpose.
What can you tell us about your present lifestyle now?
Present lifestyle?
Like work-wise, and what do you like to do in your spare time?
I work, I've worked for a long time, nearly 30 years with Rochdale Council.
What do you do for Rochdale Council?
I work with the education services in Rochdale Council. And spare time now is spent mainly looking after either my father or my grandchildren now. But I do like to, have little hobbies myself. Try to, enjoy little hobbies. Like to meet friends. Like to do a bit of travelling when I can. And yes, now because now moving around, travelling around, seeing different people, different cultures is much easier. That is pre-COVID times, but yeah, things are easier now.
Where would you like to live now?
I wouldn't like to live anywhere else. I think Rochdale's it, because I think for me, where your family is, it doesn't matter where, whether they were in Kenya. That was when my family was there. That was home.
I'm really pleased, Atiya, that you decided to stay in Rochdale, because with the job that you do, you contribute a lot to the community, and I'm really happy that you're living in Rochdale.
Thank you. We take from Rochdale, so we have to give back to Rochdale as well.
Absolutely, and I'd like to wish you all the very best for the future.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.